Please be seated. So this first part of the week, Deacon Victoria and I were able to go to a clergy conference. And so when we get together with the clergy, the bishop calls us in to reflect, to discern, and they bring in people from all over, right? Authors, speakers, interesting people. And one of the persons that we got to hear from this time was Daryl Davis. And for some of you, Daryl Davis will be a common name. For some of us, who is he? So Daryl Davis is a professional musician who was able to play with Chuck Berry and learn from him how to play the piano. Yeah? Elvis Presley, all these people, yeah? This is really pretty cool, right? So he is a professional musician, and that's his day job. But his ministry is to be in conversations with people that are quite different from him. Daryl Davis is an African American man who grew up with a father who was in the social secret service and traveled all over the world with his parents, and then as a musician has traveled all over the world himself. So he knows lots and lots of people in different cultures and has been all over the place. But one of the things that struck him was learning at a young age that people in his own country hated him even though they did not know him. And they hated him because his skin was my color or a little bit darker, right? And he was really curious about that question. Why do people hate me when they don't know me? And so he embarked in this ministry to be in conversations with leaders of the Ku Klux Klan. And for over 40 years, you can look him up. He's a really interesting person, and you can look him up, and there's interviews in CNN and TED Talks and PBS and all kinds of stuff. But for over 40 years, he's been in conversation with people, leaders of the Ku Klux Klan, and he asks them, a little bit about who they are, what their lives are, and hears them out. And he has come up with these tenets that he says that everywhere, no matter where they are or who they are, want to be loved, respected, heard, treated fairly, and that they all want the same things for their family as we want for ours. Does that resonate? And so when he engages in conversations with leaders of the Ku Klux Klan, he follows these tenets. And so he hears them. He treats them fairly. He loves on them, right? And for over 40 years, because of his ministry, he has received many robes of the Ku Klux Klan. Because after some time, not overnight, but after some time, some take longer than others, they can no longer be not only members of the Ku Klux Klan, certainly leaders. And so they send him their robes. So he showed us, he was there talking about this, and he showed us a robe from the very first person that he had in relationships with. And then go ahead and sit down. Join us. Yes. Yeah, just join us. Can you join us, and then we can talk afterwards? Thank you. Join us, please. Yes, if you can sit down and join us, and then we can talk afterwards. How about that? Thank you. Yes, if you could please join us, we'd love to have you. That'd be great. Thank you. And so he showed us these robes of it was kind of a little eerie, I have to say. Like, he pulled them out. And flags of the Confederate flags and Nazi flags, right? So his ministry has been about he strongly believes that if we are in conversation with people, no matter how different they may be from us, something good can turn up from that, right? And I think that is something that really struck me about the talk from Mr. Davis because of what the gospel reading today. And that is that at the end of this conversation between the Pharisees and Jesus, something is said. No more questions were asked of Jesus. In other words, the conversation ended. And if you remember, in the past several Sundays, we have heard of all these back and forth between Jesus and the Sadducees, Jesus and the Pharisees, and people who wanted, I would not say that they wanted a conversation. They really wanted to test Jesus, right? They kind of wanted to trap Jesus. But what if, after all these tests and Jesus responding to them in a way that they couldn't really get him, what if then they became more curious? And I wonder what would have happened. So Jesus, okay, we've been trying to trick you, but it's not working. So can you tell us a little bit more what you really mean? And what's really happening? And what you're trying to say to us? What are you trying to teach us? Why are you the way you are? What if that had happened? What would have been the end of the story? Would we have a different story? But instead, they said, no more conversation, no more questions. We just can't get beyond. And unfortunately, soon after that, they turned him over to the Romans to get crucified. And so I raise that because I think that is something important for us to think about. When we see people, when we hear people that are different than us, that think different than us, that believe different things, I think we're called to be in conversations with them, to get to know them, to understand them. Because Jesus said to the people, when he was here, the greatest commandment is to love God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and to love your neighbor as yourself. How can we love our neighbor as ourselves if we don't know them? If we don't know what's happening in their lives? If we don't know why they are the way they are? If we don't know why they believe what they believe? And either we can just say, end of conversation, or even worse, not even a beginning of a conversation. Or we can be curious. We can wonder and ask them, tell me more. You know, I don't think that way. That's not been my experience. Tell me about your life and your experience and why you believe what you believe. Tell me more. Because I think when we are not in conversation and we start just creating a narrative for people based on our own assumptions. Oh, well, they hear that kind of radio station. Oh, well, they listen to that news channel. Oh, well, they vote for that party. Oh, well, they, work in that profession. It can be quite dangerous. They're from a different religion. They speak a different language. It can be quite dangerous. And I think that the invitation that we have today is to really think about, who do we want to get to know better? Who have we made assumptions about? Who do we know in our lives that we've just kind of cut them off? Who is out there that we need to know better? And I figured, if Daryl Davis is able to have conversations with the Ku Klux Klan, I think we can have conversations with our neighbor, like literally our neighbor down the street next door. Or conversations in our families. Or conversations in our people in our congregation. Because it is in those conversations that we can get to know them better, and we may get to know ourselves better. And then being able to truly love our neighbor as we love ourselves. So I invite you to think about that. We're about to close our church year. We're going to go into Advent and expectancy and all kinds of funness. But let's think about, as we close the church year, with whom should we be talking to, individually and as a congregation? How do we get to know the people that are physically across the street and get to know them well enough so then we can love them, right? Amen.